What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a routine interview, only to face an interrogation that crosses every line of professionalism? Today, we're diving into the moment Brad Pitt walked off The View after Sunny Hostin pushed things way too far. You won't believe how uncomfortable this got, or the exact words that finally made Brad say, "Enough is enough." Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment below, because this story will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about daytime television. The morning started like any other at The View studios. Brad Pitt had agreed to appear on the show to promote his latest film, a decision his publicist had recommended as part of a carefully planned media tour. The actor arrived early, as usual, spending time with the hair and makeup team while reviewing his talking points. He had always prided himself on being prepared and professional, treating every interview, no matter how casual, with the same respect he'd give a major press conference. "Brad, you look fantastic," Whoopi Goldberg said, as they settled into their seats during a commercial break. "Thanks for coming on the show." "Thanks for having me," Brad replied with his characteristic warm smile. "I've always enjoyed coming here." Joy Behar leaned over. "We're just going to keep it light today. Talk about the movie. Maybe some fun behind-the-scenes stuff." "Sounds perfect," Brad nodded, adjusting his microphone. Sunny Hostin sat quietly at the end of the panel, reviewing her notes with an intensity that seemed unusual for a simple promotional interview. She had joined The View as a legal analyst and co-host, bringing her prosecutorial background to the table. Today, however, she seemed to have something more than movie promotion on her mind. When the show returned from break, Whoopi introduced Brad and asked about his new role. Brad slipped easily into interview mode, explaining that the film explored themes of redemption and accountability. Sarah Haynes asked about the emotional challenges of the role, and Brad elaborated calmly and thoughtfully. Sunny had stayed silent until now. Then she leaned forward slightly. "Speaking of accountability and making amends, Brad, I think our viewers would be interested in your thoughts on how public figures should handle their past mistakes." The shift in tone was subtle, but obvious. Brad maintained his composure. "I think accountability is important for everyone, not just public figures. We all make mistakes, and the key is learning from them and trying to do better." "That's a very diplomatic answer," Sunny said, her voice carrying a sharp edge. "But don't you think some mistakes require more than just learning? Don't some require consequences?" Whoopi shot Sunny a warning look. "Sunny, maybe we should focus on the film." "I think this is relevant," Sunny insisted. "After all, Brad's character is dealing with consequences for his actions. I'm just wondering how much of that resonated personally." A flicker of recognition crossed Brad's eyes. This interview was taking a turn. Any actor draws from their own experiences to some degree. That's part of the craft. "Your own experiences," Sunny repeated. "That's interesting because your own experiences include some pretty serious allegations that were never fully addressed publicly. Wouldn't you say?" The studio fell quiet. Joy and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances. Whoopi's expression hardened. "Sunny," Whoopi said firmly. "We discussed this before the show." "I know what we discussed," Sunny replied, her prosecutorial instincts fully activated. "But I think our viewers deserve honesty, not just carefully crafted PR responses." Brad took a slow breath. "I understand you have a job to do, but I came here to talk about my work. If you want to discuss other matters, perhaps that's a conversation for a different setting." "But this is the setting we have," Sunny pressed, "and frankly, I think it's telling that you're already trying to deflect. Isn't that exactly the kind of behavior that got you into trouble in the first place?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brad's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed controlled. "I'm not deflecting anything. I'm simply trying to maintain some boundaries about what I'm here to discuss." "Boundaries?" Sonny scoffed. That's rich, coming from someone who allegedly had trouble with boundaries in his personal life. Okay, that's enough, Whoopi interjected, her patience finally snapping. But Sonny wouldn't let it go. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. You sit here promoting a movie about accountability while dodging accountability for your own actions. Don't you see the irony? Brad's publicist, watching from off-camera, stepped forward slightly, signaling that things had gone too far and an exit strategy was needed. Look, Brad said, his tone still professional but far firmer than before. I understand you may have personal feelings about certain issues, Brad said carefully, trying to keep the situation under control. But this isn't the forum for that discussion. I came here in good faith to talk about my work. Personal feelings? Sonny's voice rose slightly. These aren't personal feelings, Brad. These are legitimate questions about your conduct. Questions you've managed to avoid answering for years. The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Joy attempted to interject. Maybe we should take a quick break and regroup. No, Sonny cut her off firmly. I think we should finish this conversation. She turned her attention back to Brad. You've built your career on playing heroes and good guys. But what about when the cameras stop rolling? What about the real Brad Pitt? Brad's hands, which had been resting calmly in his lap, tightened on the arms of his chair. I think you're out of line. Am I? Sonny challenged. Or am I just asking the questions other interviewers have been too starstruck to ask? You're ambushing me, Brad replied, his voice controlled but edged with frustration. This was supposed to be about my film. Everything is connected, Brad. Your art, your life, your choices. You can't just compartmentalize your way out of accountability. I'm not trying to compartmentalize anything, Brad said as he slowly rose to his feet. But I'm also not going to sit here and be attacked under the guise of an interview. Sonny leaned back with a satisfied look. So you're just going to walk away again? I'm going to remove myself from a hostile situation, Brad corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Sonny asked coolly. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the same pattern of behavior that's followed you for years. The tension in the studio grew heavy. Brad stood, his publicist inching closer to the set. The other hosts sat frozen, unsure how to intervene. Sonny, however, seemed energized, almost triumphant. Please sit down, Brad, Whoopi said, trying to regain control of the show. Let's just reset here. But Sonny pushed on. No, I think this is exactly where we need to be. You talk about patterns of behavior? Let's discuss that. Isn't it true you have a pattern of walking away when things get uncomfortable? Brad turned to face her fully, his composure cracking. What exactly are you trying to accomplish here, Sonny? I'm trying to have an honest conversation, she replied, her tone sharp and courtroom ready. Something that apparently makes you very uncomfortable. Honest conversation? Brad repeated. This isn't honest. This is an ambush. You're using your platform to attack me personally under the pretense of journalism. I'm using my platform to ask questions that need to be asked, Sonny fired back. Questions about how Hollywood protects certain people while destroying others. Questions about privilege and power, and what happens when men like you think the rules don't apply to them. Joy tried once more to intervene. Sonny, I think we should really consider where this is going. Where this is going, Sonny said without looking away from Brad, is toward the truth. Something that's been in short supply when it comes to this man's public narrative. Brad's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about my truth, don't I? Sonny challenged. I know what court documents say. I know what witnesses have testified. I know what patterns look like. I spent years prosecuting cases. You're not prosecuting a case here, Brad said, his voice rising for the first time. You're hosting a talk show, or at least you're supposed to be. Maybe that's the problem, Sonny replied calmly. Maybe too many people have treated you with kid gloves for too long. Maybe what you need is someone who isn't afraid to ask the hard questions. Sarah Haynes finally spoke. Sonny, this really isn't what we agreed to. What we agreed to, Sonny said, turning toward her co-host briefly, was a conversation. And I'm having one. If Brad can't handle basic questions about his public record, maybe he shouldn't be doing interviews. Basic questions, Brad echoed incredulously. You've been making accusations and personal attacks for the last 10 minutes. I've been asking you to take responsibility, Sonny corrected, and your reaction tells me everything I need to know. My reaction, Brad said slowly, is to a professional ambush disguised as an interview. You planned this? I plan to do my job, Sonny replied, which is to ask meaningful questions, not lob softballs so you can promote your movie and pretend the rest of your life doesn't exist. Whoopi tried again. Sonny, I think you've made your point. Have I? Sonny asked, still focused on Brad. Because he still hasn't answered a single question. He's deflected. He's complained. He's tried to control the narrative. But he hasn't once addressed the substance of what I'm asking. The substance of what you're asking, Brad said, his patience nearly gone, is based on assumptions and half-truths designed to create conflict for television. Half-truths, Sonny's voice sharpened. Are you suggesting the legal proceedings involving you were based on half-truths? Are you calling the people who came forward liars? I'm saying legal matters are complex, Brad replied carefully, and using a talk show to relitigate them is inappropriate and unprofessional. Unprofessional, Sonny repeated. That's interesting, coming from someone whose professional conduct has been questioned multiple times. That's it, Brad said firmly. I'm done with this. Of course you are, Sonny said with a satisfied nod. Just like you were done when things got difficult in your personal life. Just like you're always done when you can't control the situation. Brad paused mid-step toward the exit. He turned back sharply. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Sonny pressed. Because from where I sit, I see a pattern. When things get tough, you disappear. You use your lawyers, your publicists, your privilege. You make problems go away. You're way out of line, Brad said, his voice hard. Am I? Sonny asked. Or am I just saying what needs to be said? You come on shows like this, you smile, you charm, you talk about your art, and everyone pretends like the rest of it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter. What matters, Brad replied, is that you're using your position to conduct a personal attack on national television. What matters, Sonny countered, leaning in slightly, is that powerful men like you think you can? Brad had always been able to control every narrative, every conversation, every consequence, but not this one. The other hosts grew visibly uncomfortable as the tension escalated. Joy and Sarah glanced toward the producers off camera for guidance, while Whoopi shook her head, frustrated with how the interview had spiraled out of control. Sonny, Whoopi finally said with authority, we need to wrap this up. We need to finish this conversation, Sonny insisted, refusing to let go. Brad, she continued, leaning forward, you want to talk about your movie, where your character faces consequences for his actions? Let's talk about real consequences. Let's talk about accountability that isn't scripted. Let's talk about professional boundaries. Professional boundaries? Brad shot back. Something you seem to have forgotten exist. Sonny laughed bitterly. That's rich. You want to lecture me about professional boundaries? I want to remind you this is supposed to be an interview, not an interrogation, Brad replied. And your personal opinions don't constitute journalism. My personal opinions? Sonny's voice sharpened. These aren't opinions, Brad. These are facts. Documented events. Real people who were affected by your choices. And those real people, Brad countered, matching her intensity, deserve to have their stories told accurately, not weaponized by someone with an agenda. The only agenda I have is truth, Sonny said coldly, holding powerful people accountable for their actions. If that makes you uncomfortable, maybe you should ask yourself why. What makes me uncomfortable, Brad said, taking a controlled step back but refusing to sit, is being ambushed by someone more interested in creating television drama than conducting journalism. Television drama? Sonny's eyes flashed. You think this is drama? Asking you to take responsibility for your actions is drama? I think, Brad said slowly, you've confused your role as a talk show host with your previous role as a prosecutor, and I think you've decided to use me to make a point about issues bigger than both of us. Sonny gave a cold smile. Finally, something honest. Yes, this is bigger than both of us. This is about a system that protects men like you while silencing everyone else. And you've decided, Brad replied, to use this show as your platform to fight that system, regardless of whether it's fair to me or even appropriate for this format. Fair to you? Sonny scoffed. Was it fair to the people whose lives you disrupted? Fair to use your power and influence to shape the narrative in your favor? I'm not relitigating my personal life on your talk show, Brad said firmly. Because you can't, Sonny snapped. Because when the facts are laid out, when you can't control the story, when you can't hide behind crafted statements and expensive lawyers, the truth doesn't look so good for you. Brad's publicist stood at the edge of the set, ready to intervene. The floor manager looked increasingly nervous. The other hosts exchanged glances that silently pleaded for the segment to end. The truth, Brad said quietly, intensely, is that you've turned what was supposed to be a professional interview into a personal attack. And you're doing it because you know I can't defend myself properly in this format. You can't defend yourself, Sonny corrected, because your actions are indefensible. The words hung in the air like a dropped weapon. Brad stood still, processing what she had just said. The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras and equipment, everyone holding their breath. Indefensible, Brad repeated quietly, dangerously calm. You just called my actions indefensible on national television. I called them what they are, Sonny replied. Unaware she had crossed a line she couldn't walk back. Brad glanced around the set, at the hosts, the crew. The cameras pointed at him. When he spoke again, his voice was steady, but edged with steel. You know what's indefensible, Sonny? Using your platform to destroy someone's reputation based on your personal interpretation of events you weren't present for. I don't need to interpret anything, Sonny shot back. The facts speak for themselves. The facts, Brad said, stepping closer to the panel, are that you just committed slander on live television. You've made accusations without evidence. You've turned a professional interview into a character assassination. For the first time during the confrontation, Sonny's confidence faltered. I haven't said anything that isn't already public record. You've implied guilt, Brad countered. You've stated conclusions as facts. You've presented yourself as judge and jury. And you've done it all while hiding behind the pretense of journalism. Whoopi finally stood up. Brad, Sonny, we need to end this. Now. No, Brad said firmly, eyes never leaving Sonny. I think Sonny wants to finish this conversation. Don't you, Sonny? You wanted accountability. Let's talk about accountability. Sonny straightened, her prosecutorial instincts returning. I'm not the one on trial here. Neither am I, Brad answered sharply. But you've decided to put me on trial anyway. So let's examine your case, counselor. What evidence have you presented? What facts have you established? What due process have you followed? This isn't a courtroom, Sonny said. but her voice lacked the certainty it had minutes before. "No," Brad said. "It's worse. In a courtroom, I'd have the right to defend myself properly, the right to cross-examine witnesses, the right to present evidence.